Hey guys, it's Size. This time around I'm going to be doing a different style of video. I understand that a lot of people watch my videos for the dungeon walkthrough, but I think the large majority of my viewer base are here because I play Shadow Priest. I think that's, the deciding factor in people that decide to sub and ask questions, and to be honest, the majority of the comments are asking about Shadow Priest. So I thought I'd put together a video that kind of entails what Shadow Priest is like to play. I know there's loads of other Shadow YouTubers out there and streamers that have talked about the changes, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch, but I haven't really seen anybody actively talk about how it feels to play at the minute in regards of coming out of Shadowlands into Dragonflight, and how the changes make it feel to play, not how it plays. So in this video, I'll be going over the different capstone talents, the changes generally, but more importantly, how they make our spec feel to play. I hope you enjoy. Make sure to ask questions in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So, throughout the entirety of the Dragonflight beta, I'd like to think Shadow has received the largest batch of changes among all specs. Blizzard have said that their initial aim was to address dungeon gameplay surrounding Seer Nightmare, how horrible it was to play in Shadowlands, and generally how when you were pressing Seer Nightmare, it didn't feel fun, it didn't feel engaging. You just felt like as soon as you capture Insanity, you see a Nightmare, and again, the fact that it was tied behind Mindseer, and the fact that it didn't feel fun. It doesn't matter how good Seer Nightmare was, it was still capped behind having X amount of ticks on Mindseer and having to recast that. Any other spec in the game kinda has their AoE, but it isn't always tied behind having to cast another ability. It just wasn't engaging, it wasn't fun. You didn't have to think about it, you just ended up doing it. So, some of the main changes, you've got Shadow Crash. It now applies Vampiric Touch to 4 targets. It feels really nice to press. In Shadowlands, personally, I found it quite frustrating to press because you had to press it. Eventually, once you had all your dots up, and again, Shadow Crash didn't apply dots. So you're pressing it for the big chunk of damage that you get, but you had to make sure you had all your dots up first, whether it was through Misery, Seer Nightmare, or if you're playing Twist of Fate. Shadow Priest still needed the dots up, so you had to press Shadow Crash somewhere in your rotation. It was just finding the right place to do it. And now, it gives you the freedom of using those extra GCDs elsewhere. So, sadly, dots do time out quicker in Dragonflight, but with the addition of Shadow Crash every 25 or so seconds, and the pairing with Misery, it's really nice. There were more changes last night to Shadow Priest. They've reorganised the Shadow Tree. Dark Evangelism now increases Mindseer, and it wasn't. Before, you were pressing Dark Evangelism expecting to get X amount of damage on all other abilities that weren't dots, and yet Mindseer wasn't scaling. So they've changed Dark Ascension to be on a talent choice with Void Eruption. Again, they kinda do the same thing. I do think we'll lean more towards Void Eruption, as you have the Void Bolt for extending dots, and the big bit of damage that you get in an AoE situation from Void Eruption will be really nice. They've fixed Mind Spike, so it no longer removes damage over time effects, and as it says there, critical strike chance bonus to Mind Blast has been moved to Mind Melt. That's another talent in itself. They've just been jigging around the talent locations at the minute, but that's not all bad. Some talents have now been moved onto different rows that you weren't really looking at before because you had to reach a capstone. and now that's not the case. You get to pick talents that you wouldn't have even looked at before. So that's a good change on Blizzard's behalf. Derangement increases Mind Seer damage by 20% instead of increases its cast speed. Amazing. Mind Seer did need a damage buff, and Derangement made it felt weird because you were thinking you were going to get 5 ticks because it was casting quicker, but you were still only getting the 4. Now it doesn't matter about the amount of ticks, you're just going to be getting the damage. So some cooldown abilities have had a lower cooldown, all the normal stuff that you can see. It's not going to change how you play the spec, but it's nice to have the options there. So looking at the talent tree now, this is the updated one. I've took a little recording from this morning, and just going through, most of the main abilities are in the same place. It's just that change of Shadow Crash. You've got Void Eruption with Dark Evangelism. Mind Spike's now on the right. You get to pick Psychic Link on the right. And Void Torrent. This was a weird one. I feel like Blizzard have wanted us to play Void Torrent for a while, but they just didn't know where to put it in the tree to make us likely to use it. Putting it along with Damnation is a really good choice, because 9 times out of 10, unless you're playing PvP, you're not going to be taking Damnation. You'd just take Misery and just use the extra GCG. But Void Torrent's really fun to play. I've always thought that Void Torrent was really fun in Legion, coming through, do you know, when you were using it for Surrender to Madness? And now that you get to have it permanently, I'm really happy with. And then on the bottom right capstone, it's really fun, the change of the positions, because now I've been able to access talents that it was hard choice. You know, it wasn't always easy to decide what talent to pick, and now Blizzard have just made it that much easier. It increases the damage of Mind Seer, it makes it a free cast, on a proc chance of course, it's a percentage chance of proc, but having Mind Seer in your toolkit now and being able to use it without fully dumping your insanity, if you time it properly on some boss fights, you're going to melt some really high priority targets, and again, make Shadow all that more fun to play, in my opinion. So just going through some of the things through the beta at the minute that I have an opinion on, and I'd like to go through it really quick and just kind of get your guys' opinions in the comments as well. So Shadow Flame Prism is still a talent. It's the exact same as it was in Shadowlands. It's not as bad without Void Eruption. Obviously we're going to be playing it now most likely, but before in the previous build it would have made you have 2 charges of Mind Blast and then a third with the proc. In Shadowlands it was really clunky, because as soon as you pressed Mindbender, you had to dump every single Mind Blast that you had, as well as Shadow Word Death. The Shadow Word Death with Mindbender now is a lot more valuable, as you're getting that cleave damage from Shadow Word Death anyway, as long as there are targets with Shadow Word Pain there. But I think that's a really good change, as you had to press it anyway, so you may as well be getting some reward from it now. Idol of Cthulhu, it's a nice passive play. It's the Void Tendril proc, the legendary from Shadowlands. It's nice to have the extra insanity, but again, it doesn't change how you play. Might be a viable alternative for the player that doesn't like min-maxing, or if they just like pressing buttons and using procs and seeing what it does. But yeah, you don't have to worry about it. If you take it, it's just passive play. You'll reap the rewards of the insanity, and that's it. Idol of N'Zoth. This is a really fun sounding ability, right? You know, Echoing Void. It sounds cool, it sounds shadowy, and it does splash damage, and it can stack on multiple targets, and it would do good damage if it didn't scale with attack power. It's scaling with attack power at the minute. It has since the Dragonflight beta released. Blizzard haven't yet changed it, but I understand they're still trying to look at other abilities and other builds for the Shadow Tree, but hopefully when they get round to fixing this, it'll be a pretty nice pick in AoE situations. Lunacy has just been removed. Probably a good idea, because it was crap. It didn't do much. taking 5 insanity off Mindseer still wasn't enough. You weren't getting an extra tick, you weren't gaining from it. It was just a nice passive talent to pick, but it was crap, in my opinion again. Idol of Yogg-Saron. This is the one that with your shadowy apparitions, when you hit 50 throughout any fight, Blizzard just track this as a buff, and as soon as it sees that you've hit 50, it spawns a thing from beyond. It's a nice little pet that just does single target damage. The damage was decent, but it would be nice if it cleaved. It's only single target damage, so in Mythic Plus, if you pick this, you'll be seeing what I'd say maximum 8 to 10 per dungeon in a quick dungeon. And if it's only doing single target damage, and it's not insane, it's only decent, you're not gonna be getting as big of a benefit as playing a different talent. But if they change it to cleave maybe, then it stands a chance to compete with the rest. Hunger and Void and Surrender have been removed, so I'm not going to talk about them. It was in the latest beta build, so people might not be aware of it yet. But again, I don't think you would have picked these regardless. Just going into talking about Shadow's utility in a dungeon or a raid, the off healing, it feels really good. It's nice to be able to play Shadow, which as a spec back in Mr. Pandaria, Warlords of Draenor, when you had Divine Star and Halo, that healed as well as did damage, you felt useful to the raid. Recently, Shadow Priests have only brought single target damage, which is a shame because the whole class fantasy and the reason that I was playing Shadow Priest at least was the power to assist the raid more, whether that be through letting off a big Vampiric Embrace, having Life Grip. You've seen on Remnant on Azul having the Master Spell meant you weren't forced into playing Healer Priests. It was nice, right? It's a reason for your guild to bring you to content. But it's really nice to see the off healing, whether it be through Power Word Shield, Vampiric Embrace, even Devour and Plague does a lot of healing now. So I find it highly unlikely that in a raid encounter you're going to need healing. You're not going to need spot healed because you've got that much passive healing going on. It just makes your healers' lives so much easier. As well as Power Infusion, I think coming into Dragonflight, Shadow Priest is finally one of the specs that guilds are going to feel comfortable stacking. Having the Twin Priestess talent on the class tree means that every priest will have the option to PI somebody else at the full power. It's 100% usage. It's crazy that Blizzard have let this happen, but I understand why they didn't really want to mess around with it, because yes, it's a shadow buff and it felt crap in Casa Nathria having to give it to a Fire Mage or a Demonology Warlock, but it was an overall damage increase. We get that again, but we're not losing anything. So if you have 3 priests in your raid in Dragonflight, whether it be 1 healer, 2 shadow, 2 healers, 1 shadow, 6 people in your raid are getting Power Infusion. It's going to be huge. It's going to change compositions. It makes Shadow a stackable class, as I mentioned before. And it's really nice to be able to turn to your raid leader and say, listen, bring me. We have a good utility, good off healing, good damage, and PI. That's 4 things that not every spec has had in the game for a while. It does make us more enticing to raid leaders and content clearers. So definitely use that with your raid leaders. Tell them, listen, I have all these 4 things. Tell me another class that has those 4 things, and if I perform better, it's a win-win. They'd be silly to not at least consider it. So the most recent changes, the reposition of the Spectre, making more abilities achievable without having to go out your way and wasting points. Mind Devourer actually makes Mindseer a viable option in AoE scenarios, where it wasn't in the past, just because it would be a waste of insanity. And it's very competitive, it really is. But with that, guys, I think that's all I wanted to speak about. I understand it's not a massive comprehensive video of how to play Shadow, but at the end of the day, it was a recent changes thing. It was an opinionated, it was informative, and this is all my opinion. I understand that other Shadow creators will have different opinions, but they may not be looking at the same things that I'm looking at, which is how Shadow is to play. And it finally feels like Blizzard have been messing around with the spec for a while, but it finally feels like they've become aware to the issues the Shadow has, and they're more likely to introduce changes to make Shadow feel good to play, like many other specs in the game. That's what we've been lacking in a while, and I'm glad to finally say we're getting some of that treatment ourselves. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate every comment, every like, every sub. I am still working on putting out more and more content. There will be more beta invites going out, so if anybody wants to run any content with me, please let me know. I'm going to continue doing the dungeon runs, going into Mythic Plus when it finally comes out in the beta, and I will be doing the raid testing, so keep your eye on the channel if you're interested in all that. And again, I will try to link Warcraft logs as a point of evidence for every single video that I do, whether that be dungeons, world encounters, raids, and Mythic Plus. But I'm really happy with where Shadow is at the minute, and hopefully Blizzard decide to keep it going themselves. But with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or night, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for watching.